Ethan had never believed in love at first sight. Not really. He had laughed at the idea, thinking it was something out of movies or fairy tales. But the night he met Claire, all his skepticism vanished. She didn't enter the room like someone demanding attention. She wasn't flashy or loud. And yet, the moment their eyes met, the air seemed to shift around him. Her smile was quiet, almost hesitant, but it carried a warmth that made him feel like the rest of the world had paused, just for that instant. He was 22, still learning about life and the kind of love that left you breathless. Claire was different. There was something in the way she held herself, the grace in her movements, the soft but confident tilt of her chin. He didn't know her story, didn't know her past, but somehow he knew he wanted to be part of her present. Their first encounter was brief. A smile, a few exchanged words, a laugh that lingered long after she walked away. But it was enough. Ethan felt a spark that didn't fade. Within days, they began seeing each other. Coffee in the mornings, walks in the evening, long talks that stretched until the stars blinked awake. Each moment together felt weightless and yet heavy with a promise neither fully understood. She told him she was 25, mature enough to seem experienced but close enough in age to share adventures with him. He didn't question it, why would he? He was captivated, enthralled, utterly enchanted. The first few weeks were perfect, too perfect. Then the cracks began to appear. It was subtle at first, a missed call, a hurried explanation, a day spent busy without reason. Then came the whispers of her phone calls, hushed conversations that stopped whenever he entered the room. When he asked, her reply was always gentle, almost apologetic. "It's nothing, Ethan, don't worry about it." But he did worry. Something in his chest twisted uneasily, a warning he couldn't ignore. One night, after a quiet dinner in his tiny apartment, the weight of uncertainty became unbearable. He looked at her, the soft light of the lamp casting shadows across her delicate features, and asked softly, "Claire, I need the truth. I need you to be honest with me." For the first time, she didn't smile. She didn't answer immediately. Her hands fidgeted with the edge of her sleeve, twisting the fabric in a way that betrayed her fear. And then, in a whisper, barely audible, she said it. "I'm not 25. Ethan blinked. "Then, how old are you?" She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage she hadn't known she possessed. "I'm 30, she admitted. His mind spun. 30? That didn't seem to matter much. He was still captivated, but before he could process it, she continued, voice trembling. "And I'm married." The words landed like a thunderclap. Married. She had a daughter, Emily, only 7 years old. She was trapped in a life he hadn't even imagined. But then he saw her eyes, vulnerable, scared, weighted by secrets. And in that instant, Ethan made a choice he couldn't explain, only feel. He couldn't walk away. Something told him this story, their story, was only beginning. Claire's confession hung in the air like a storm cloud. Ethan could feel the weight of it pressing against his chest, the kind of weight that makes your heart pound and your hands tremble at the same time. She wasn't lying. She was 30, married, and had a 7-year-old daughter. Yet, despite all that, something deep inside him refused to let go. For weeks after that night, they met in secret. Every stolen moment was a thrill and a risk. Every touch, every smile, every word exchanged carried the weight of a truth neither could fully admit to the world. Claire's life had been defined by rules she never asked for. Richard Hale, her husband, was a man of power, influence, and cold precision. He ran his life like a chess game, with every move calculated, every decision measured. Claire had been trapped in it for years, a golden cage she had no key to. And yet, here she was, standing before Ethan, trembling but determined to carve a path to freedom. Finally, after months of careful planning, the divorce was finalized. Claire had won her independence, but freedom came at a price. Richard, for all his fury, was a man who valued public image above all else. He gave her money, enough to start anew, but only to keep the scandal buried. Ethan had helped her quietly through it all. He had no wealth, no connections, only determination and love. He stayed by her side, offering support in ways that money couldn't buy, listening when she was afraid, holding her when the memories of her past threatened to drown her, helping her plan every step toward the life she deserved. For Claire, the relief was overwhelming, but it was tinged with fear. The storm wasn't over. She knew Richard's wrath could strike at any time, even from behind the veil of polite civility. And then came the revelation that set her heart racing with dread. Richard had discovered Ethan existed. "He knows," Claire whispered one night, eyes wide, voice trembling. "He knows about us." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. The man who had once signed the divorce papers with a cold, detached smile now had a target, and they were in it. Every day, every quiet moment became a calculated risk. Yet even in the shadow of Richard's power, something unbreakable was forming between them. A bond built on stolen glances, whispered promises, and a love that refused to bow to fear. Ethan understood the danger, yet he stayed. For Claire, for Emily, for the fragile, beautiful life that was beginning to take shape despite the risks. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning of a story that would test every ounce of courage they had. Richard Hale was a man who commanded attention without raising his voice. His influence stretched far beyond the walls of his office and the glossy magazine covers that praised his success. He had built an empire in the government's weapons industry, a network of power and precision that made most people tremble silently in his presence. When Claire finally asked for a divorce, Richard agreed, not because he had any mercy or affection for her, but because a public scandal would ruin his carefully curated image. He signed the papers, gave her money, and let her go. But Richard did not know about Ethan. He had no idea that in the shadows of Claire's new freedom, another man had captured her heart. When he discovered Ethan's existence, the reaction was nothing short of volcanic, though silent. Richard was a man who never allowed raw emotion to show in public. Pride, humiliation, and rage twisted together inside him, but he wore his usual calm, collected mask. Claire sensed it immediately. The divorce papers didn't mean freedom if Richard's pride burned silently in the background. She had escaped his control on paper, but she couldn't escape the reality of his power. So she made a decision, a painful one. Ethan's presence, though essential to her happiness, could not be revealed. Not publicly, not to friends, not even to Emily, her 7-year-old daughter, who still believed Ethan was simply Mom's friend. Emily adored him already, though. He read her bedtime stories, helped with her homework, and made her laugh in ways only he could. But the truth remained buried, locked behind a veil of caution. Ethan understood, even though it hurt him. Each day he stayed in the shadows, each day he pretended to be just a friend, was a day he sacrificed openly loving the woman he wanted to spend his life with. And all the while, Richard's presence loomed, quiet but relentless. Every call he made to Claire was measured, polite on the surface, but there was a tension in his words, a threat lurking beneath the civility. He was watching, always watching. And a man like Richard never forgot. Yet, in the quiet moments between fear and vigilance, Ethan and Claire's bond deepened. Every whispered conversation, every late-night touch, every smile shared when the world wasn't watching, strengthened the fragile structure of love they were building. They couldn't be reckless, they couldn't be open, but they could be together. And in a life so precarious, that was enough, for now. Claire had never worked a day in her life, not in the conventional sense, not in a job that required contracts, deadlines, or negotiating with strangers. Her world had been shaped by Richard's wealth and influence, by the predictable comfort of a life where her needs were always met before she even voiced them. Now, at 31, she was staring at a future that required her to build something from scratch. The idea had come from Sophia, her longtime friend. A beauty salon, modern, elegant, a space where women could come not just for haircuts and manicures, but for confidence, for transformation. Sophia had the concept, the vision, the experience. Claire had the capital, the freedom, the resources, but no idea where to begin. The first day they visited the empty space, Claire felt a wave of panic. Bare walls, scattered construction materials, and the faint smell of fresh paint overwhelmed her. She turned to Sophia, trying to mask the fear. I don't even know where to start," she admitted, her voice trembling. Sophia smiled, reassuring but firm. "You'll learn. You have the resources and the vision. I'll guide you, step by step." Ethan, ever present in his quiet way, stood beside Claire. He had agreed to help, not because he had experience in business, but because he had heart, determination, and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. He made spreadsheets, tracked expenses, helped negotiate with suppliers, and even lifted boxes of furniture when the budget ran thin. He didn't complain, he didn't scold, he simply did what needed to be done. And yet every day brought new challenges. Permits seemed like a foreign language, staff interviews were nerve-wracking, and every decision felt monumental. Claire often stayed late, poring over documents, her hands shaking, her confidence wavering. "I don't understand any of this," she whispered to Ethan one night as they sat amidst stacks of invoices. "I feel stupid." He took her hand gently. "You're not stupid, you're learning. No one starts knowing everything." But Claire knew it wasn't just the learning curve, it was the shock of independence, the realization that she couldn't rely on luxury or money alone. She had to think, act, decide. For the first time in her life, she had to stand on her own. Close friends already knew about Ethan. They had seen the way he looked at Claire, the softness in her eyes when he was near, and they kept their secret, guarding it like a precious gem. And so, amid the chaos of construction, supplier negotiations, and training staff, something remarkable happened. Claire began to grow, not just as a business owner, but as a person. She was learning the value of effort, of mistakes, of persistence. She discovered strength she hadn't known she possessed. And Ethan, silent and patient, provided the support she needed without ever demanding recognition. The beauty salon became more than a business. It became a symbol of independence, a statement that Claire could exist outside the confines of Richard's shadow, and that she could build a life with someone who loved her unconditionally. And through it all, one thing became crystal clear. This life, however uncertain and challenging, was hers. The beauty salon had become a small miracle. What began as a chaotic, overwhelming space filled with paint fumes, boxes, and unanswered questions had transformed into a place of light and life. Clients arrived, hesitant at first, then captivated by the warmth and care infused into every corner. Claire watched it all with awe. The chairs were arranged perfectly, the mirrors gleamed, the scent of lavender and fresh polish filled the air. Sophia moved with confident grace, managing the staff and the day-to-day, but it was Claire's heart in every detail. The little touches, the thoughtful gestures, the atmosphere that made clients feel not just pampered, but seen. Within a year, they opened a second salon. Plans for a third, fourth, even a fifth in nearby cities were already underway. The idea of a franchise no longer felt like a dream. It was becoming a reality. Amid the whirlwind, Claire realized something else: confidence. She had never felt it before, not truly. She could make decisions. She could stand up for herself. She could create something of her own, something that belonged to her. And with that confidence came another decision, one that had lingered quietly in her heart. One evening, as Emily sat on the couch reading, Claire knelt beside her, taking a deep breath. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "there's something I want you to know. About Ethan." Emily looked up, eyes wide. "He's not just Mommy's friend," Claire continued gently. "He's someone very special to me." Emily paused, then smiled with the innocent clarity only a child can have. "I like him," she said simply. "He makes you smile." Claire felt a wave of relief and love wash over her. For the first time, there were no secrets between them, no hidden truths, no pretenses. Soon after, Ethan moved in. The apartment, small but cozy, filled with warmth, laughter, and life. Evenings became family dinners, mornings were spent getting Emily ready for school, and nights stretched into quiet conversations about dreams, fears, and the small victories of the day. Ethan worked tirelessly. Every day he pushed himself to earn more, to help Claire maintain the lifestyle she had grown used to, and to support the expanding salons. He wasn't rich, not even close, but he gave everything he had. For Claire's 32nd birthday, he surprised her with a car, a used cabriolet, perfect in color, polished, gleaming under the afternoon sun. Not brand new, not a luxury like she had known in her life with Richard, but a gift chosen with care and thought, given from the heart. Claire hesitated as she ran her hands along its smooth curves. She had never driven anything secondhand before, but she forced a smile and leaned in, pressing a kiss to Ethan's cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, truly meaning it. She would learn to cherish the love behind the gift, even if it wasn't what she had been accustomed to. And yet, in the quiet moments, the small ache remained, the shadow of Richard's world, the life she had left behind, the wealth and comfort that now seemed distant. But Ethan's love, steady and unwavering, reminded her that happiness wasn't about luxury, it was about presence, effort, and commitment. Together they built a life that was messy, challenging, and imperfect, and yet more beautiful than Claire had ever imagined. Emily had a way of speaking that was too honest for her own good. She didn't understand secrecy, nuance, or adult consequences. She only understood what she felt and saw. One afternoon, during a casual conversation with her father, she mentioned Ethan. "He lives with us now," she said cheerfully. "He's really nice, Daddy." The line went silent. Ethan nearby had no idea what had been said, but Richard Hale heard every word. "Excuse me?" Richard's voice was low, controlled, but the ice in it could have frozen fire. Emily repeated herself, entirely unaware of the storm she had just unleashed. And with that innocent confession, a new tension entered their lives, a storm of fury that Claire and Ethan had not fully anticipated. The phone rang for Ethan a short while later. He didn't recognize the number, but the moment he answered, the fury in Richard's voice made the air thrum around him. "If you ever touch my daughter with your hand, boy," Richard growled, "you'll have problems bigger than you can imagine." Ethan's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. The line went dead, leaving a ringing silence that carried more threat than any words could convey. Claire's heart sank. She knew Richard's wrath was never empty. His influence stretched far, and his power was silent but absolute. Yet she refused to retreat. She refused to hide. She had begun to carve a life for herself and for Emily, and she would not let fear dictate every step. Instagram became her outlet. She began posting little glimpses of her life with Ethan, their mornings, the small joys, the beauty salons, even candid moments of laughter. Slowly, her followers grew. She was no longer just Richard's former wife. She was Claire, independent, resilient, and rebuilding her life. But success carried its own pressure. Claire was earning, slowly but surely, enough to support her new lifestyle, but she wanted Ethan to rise with her. She needed him to stand beside her, to be her partner not just in love, but in life. Ethan tried. He pushed harder than ever, taking on extra work, late nights, small contracts, anything to keep up with the growing demands of their life. But money was never enough. Each day brought a new expense, luxury furniture, gifts for Claire and Emily, bills that seemed to grow faster than his earnings. Fate intervened in its own strange way. Ethan's grandmother passed away, leaving him her old house. He sold it, took the money, and together with Claire, they signed a mortgage for a house they had chosen, their first real home. It wasn't luxury, not by the standards Claire had known, but it was theirs. And in that moment, amidst the stress and the sacrifice, it felt like a triumph. Even with the home secured, the tension with Richard lingered. His voice haunted Ethan's mind. "You'll have problems bigger than you can imagine." But within the walls of their new home, amidst the paint, furniture, and boxes, something else emerged. Strength, love, and the quiet determination to build a life together, no matter the storms that lay beyond their door. The house smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. Every room echoed with the soft hum of life slowly taking shape, boxes stacked in corners, the scent of varnished wood mingling with new linens. It wasn't just a building anymore, it was theirs. Ethan had suggested splitting the costs 50-50. He didn't do it lightly. He worked tirelessly, earning more than ever before. But the reality was stark. Luxury furniture, mortgage payments, gifts for Claire and Emily, daily expenses. It was all more than he could shoulder alone. Each day brought new bills, each decision a balance between desire and practicality. Claire hesitated at first. She had never managed money herself, had never been used to compromise, had always lived in the comfort Richard's wealth had provided. But she saw the quiet strength in Ethan's eyes, the way he worked, the sacrifices he made, and she finally nodded. "Okay, 50-50, she murmured. Ethan's jaw tightened, not from frustration but from relief and love. He wanted equality, partnership, and he wanted Claire and Emily to feel secure without drowning him in expectations. Life settled into a rhythm. They arranged furniture, chose colors for the walls, debated over lighting, and laughed when Emily tried to pick the most outrageous combinations. Every piece they chose carried meaning, a symbol of building something together, brick by brick, decision by decision. Yet Ethan noticed something that tugged quietly at his heart. On social media, Claire shone like a star. Every day she posted stories, images, and videos, her life with Ethan subtly celebrated. Her friends adored her, strangers admired her, but he knew the truth behind the curated images. Real life was messy, chaotic, sometimes exhausting, and not every friendship was genuine. Yet he said nothing, because love wasn't about criticism, it was about support. And love had grown within him in ways even he hadn't anticipated. He loved her fiercely, and now that they had a home, the thought of family consumed him. The life they had built together was beautiful, but incomplete. One evening, as the sun dipped low, spilling golden light across the living room, Ethan took Claire's hands in his. She looked up, curiosity in her eyes, warmth and trust in her gaze. "I love you," he said softly. "I know things haven't been easy. I know life has been complicated, but I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build everything with you, our home, our family, our future." Claire's breath caught. The words, simple yet profound, carried the weight of every struggle, every sacrifice, every stolen moment they had shared. He knelt down, reaching into his pocket, revealing a small velvet box. Her eyes widened, tears threatening, her heart swelling. "Will you marry me?" he asked. Claire's mind raced, thinking of Emily, the salons, the renovations, the hard-won independence, and the man who had stood quietly by her side through it all. She thought of every day Ethan had worked, every sacrifice he had made, every effort to make her life whole again. "Yes," she whispered, a laugh of joy mixing with tears. "Yes, I will." And in that moment, surrounded by the unfinished walls, the scattered boxes, and the scent of new beginnings, they weren't just committing to a wedding. They were committing to a life, imperfect, challenging, and fiercely beautiful, built on love, trust, and the quiet courage to face whatever storms the future might bring. Their wedding had been modest, intimate, warm, and shared only with their closest friends. It had been beautiful in its simplicity, yet Claire had dreamed of a honeymoon somewhere tropical, far from worries, somewhere magical like the Maldives. Ethan, practical and cautious, shook his head. "Claire, I can't afford that right now," he said gently. "I paid for the wedding, the house, everything. Maybe we can split it 50-50? Claire felt a rush of disappointment and frustration. Tears filled her eyes. 50-50? She whispered, her voice breaking. That night she cried endlessly, sobbing over dreams that felt just out of reach. Ethan stayed by her side, offering comfort and suggesting smaller alternatives, but nothing could erase her heartbreak. Emily, hearing her mother cry, picked up the phone and called her real dad. "Daddy?" she whispered. Minutes later, the front door banged open. Richard Hale appeared, tall, imposing, and furious. His eyes blazed with anger. Claire froze. Fear gripped her as he strode into the room. "I will not allow my daughter to live in a home where people cry, fight, or break down like this," Richard barked. Without waiting for explanations, he shoved Ethan toward the door. Claire tried to speak, her voice trembling. "Richard, please, let me explain." But he wouldn't listen. He cut her off, ignoring every word she tried to say. His presence alone was suffocating, and even Ethan could not stand against the force of his fury. Once Richard left, the room felt emptier than before. Claire turned to Ethan, her chest tight with a mix of fear, anger, and disappointment. For the first time in months, she couldn't speak to him. Her tears had faded, but her heart was heavy. She didn't want comfort or explanations. She only wanted to process the shock and frustration that had erupted in their home. And so, that night ended in silence. Ethan stayed close, quietly patient, knowing she needed space, while Claire lay awake, angry, disappointed, and frightened by the reminder that Richard's shadow could reach them at any time. Claire's world was changing faster than she had imagined. Her salons thrived, growing from a single space into multiple locations, and soon she expanded internationally as part of a franchise. Success brought recognition, admiration, and a following on social media that seemed endless. Every post, every story, every smile crafted for the camera showcased a woman confident, polished, and unstoppable. Earnings flowed in, more than Ethan could manage on his own. But the reality was clear. Despite her financial success, he still carried most of the weight at home. Mortgage payments, furniture, gifts for Emily, and the endless costs that came with maintaining their life together. Ethan worked tirelessly, day and night, his hands raw with effort, his body exhausted, his mind constantly calculating. Then came the news that unsettled Claire more than she expected. Richard had married again, and his new wife was pregnant. A twinge of unease gnawed at her stomach, though she barely understood why. Ethan noticed it first, the way Claire would subtly check Richard's social media every day, scrolling through pictures of the new couple, lingering on images that stirred feelings she didn't like to admit. On Instagram, Claire became almost a different person. Outwardly, she was radiant, kind, and endlessly generous. She engaged with followers, congratulated friends, and curated a life that seemed effortless and perfect. But in real life, her thoughts were sharper, her words often tinged with sarcasm or frustration, her patience thinner than her online persona suggested. The tension began to seep into their relationship. Arguments became more frequent, small disagreements escalating into drawn-out fights. They never happened in front of Emily. The child's innocence was sacred, but behind closed doors, words were sharper, emotions rawer. Ethan felt the strain in every movement, in the weight of every conversation. His exhaustion was no longer just physical, it was emotional, the cost of trying to support both Claire and the household she now demanded. Yet, despite the fights, they stayed together. Love remained, stubborn and resilient. But it had taken on a heavier, more complicated shape. Their life, once full of shared dreams and quiet domestic warmth, now carried the shadows of jealousy, pride, and exhaustion. Claire scrolled through her phone late one night, pausing on a photo of Richard's new family. A shiver ran through her. She couldn't explain why it bothered her so much, and she certainly couldn't admit it to Ethan. Yet the tension was there, unspoken but undeniable, a silent wedge that threatened to grow if they didn't find a way to navigate the storm together. Ethan watched her from across the room, tired, weary, and quietly worried. He loved her fiercely, But the pressure was relentless, and every day felt like a balancing act between supporting her ambitions, keeping peace, and preserving the fragile home they had fought so hard to build. And so, their life continued. Glamorous on the outside, turbulent within, a constant push and pull between love, ambition, and the shadows of the past. At first, the scandals were small, minor disagreements about money, but over time, they grew, fueled entirely by finances. Claire loved the idea of a glamorous, luxurious life. Bags, shoes, clothes, dinners, weekends, everything carefully curated to show a lifestyle that rivaled anyone else's. Ethan couldn't understand it. He had worked tirelessly, earned more than most of his friends at 27, managed the mortgages, renovations, and daily life, yet every month it seemed like money slipped through their hands faster than he could calculate. One evening, exhausted after yet another long day, Ethan sat her down. "Claire, we need to start saving, at least for Emily's education. She's growing up fast and she'll need a future we can provide for her." Claire's response was almost dismissive. "Richard will pay for it. He can, if you can't." Ethan's jaw tightened. He was already paying for everything: mortgage, renovations, gifts, household expenses. He worked harder than anyone he knew, sacrificed sleep, weekends, even his own ambitions, just to keep their life afloat. Yet Claire's words felt like a slap, a reminder that his efforts were never enough. Money wasn't the only issue, it was the principle. She postponed thoughts of children indefinitely, while Ethan carried the weight of the household and quietly dreamed of the family he wanted. The constant push for more, the endless expenditures, it was exhausting. It left Ethan drained, frustrated, and increasingly resentful. He had earned enough to live comfortably, far beyond his peers, but no matter what he did, he could not reach Richard's level of wealth, nor satisfy Claire's expectations. And slowly, the truth he had avoided for months crystallized in his mind. He loved Claire, but love alone could not sustain him. He felt used, valued more for his ability to provide than for who he was. His patience, sacrifices, and devotion were being taken for granted. One night, after yet another argument over expenses and luxuries, Ethan realized what he had been denying. It was time. Time to end this relationship before it consumed the best parts of him, before he lost himself entirely to someone who wanted him only for his money. The realization hit him like cold water, sharp and undeniable. He loved Claire, but he could not continue this way. Self-respect, boundaries, and the chance for a future that included stability and emotional security mattered more than any luxurious facade. And for the first time in years, Ethan understood that stepping away might be the only way to protect himself, and perhaps, in the long run, to give Claire the chance to see what truly mattered beyond wealth and appearances. Claire didn't want to split up. She loved Ethan more than she had ever loved anyone, more than she had ever imagined possible. But the constant stress over money, the endless pressure to maintain a luxurious image, and her own fears had made her blind at times, blind to Ethan's sacrifices, blind to the strain she was putting on him, blind to the life they were actually building together. After long, tear-filled conversations and nights of frustration, they made a painful decision: to separate for a time. Not because love was gone, but because the tension, the money, and the exhaustion had clouded their relationship to the point that they needed space to breathe and reflect. Ethan moved into a small apartment temporarily, carrying his guilt and sadness silently. Claire remained in their shared home, haunted by the absence of his presence and the hollow feeling that success, wealth, and appearances could never replace the love they had. Then, the world outside their private struggles shifted dramatically. Richard, her ex-husband, was accused of corruption. The news rippled through social networks and tabloids, catching attention far and wide. One blogger, sharp and relentless, made a video linking Claire to Richard. The video suggested that her thriving salons and flourishing business were funded by her ex-husband's money, implying that she had leveraged the divorce to build her empire. For some reason, this blogger had gotten details that even Claire thought were private. Details about how Richard had supported her financially after their separation and during the early years of her business. Claire watched the video with disbelief. The screen blurred with tears, her hands shaking. She had worked tirelessly to make the business succeed, to justify her own independence, to prove to herself and to Ethan that she was capable. Yet here was someone reducing her accomplishments to mere reliance on Richard's money. Ethan, hearing about the video, felt a mixture of anger and helplessness. He wanted to protect her, to defend her against the unfair claims, but the temporary separation made it complicated. He could only watch as the world questioned Claire's success and reputation, knowing how much she had genuinely fought for it. Even apart, their connection lingered, fragile but undeniable. Love remained, a quiet, aching reminder of what they had. And it was stronger than the rumors, the money scandals, and the pressure from Richard's shadow. But the scandal served as another test, showing Claire that even hard-earned success could be misinterpreted, and Ethan that love alone could not always shield them from the storms of the world around them. Ethan never stopped believing in Claire. Despite the scandals, the money fights, and the temporary separation, he knew her heart, her ambition, and her determination. Slowly, carefully, they found their way back to each other. Love had not disappeared. It had only been tested, strained, and reshaped. But the world outside wasn't so forgiving. The video linking Claire's success to Richard's money went viral. Public opinion shifted overnight. Comments turned cruel, influencers and bloggers called out her business, and whispers became headlines. People began canceling her salons. Clients stopped booking. Revenue plummeted. Claire, who had fought so hard to build her empire, watched it crumble, powerless against the tide of outrage and misconception. Ethan recognized the moment for what it was, a chance to show Claire that he could be her financial support, her anchor in turbulent waters. He made a decisive choice. "We'll do this together," he told her. "I'll help you save your business." He sold their house, the luxury home that had symbolized their past life, and moved them to a rented apartment. It wasn't the grand house they had loved, but it was spacious, comfortable, and a home they could rebuild in. From the proceeds, Ethan gave Claire money to stabilize her salons, maintain operations, and start the long, painstaking work of restoring her reputation. Claire felt a surge of gratitude, a renewed respect for the young man who had sacrificed so much for her, who had never abandoned her even when the world seemed to turn against them. She hugged him tightly, silently acknowledging the depth of his devotion. But the storm wasn't over. New details about Richard's corruption emerged, clear evidence of illegal dealings, manipulation, and fraud. He would face prison, and the government launched a full investigation into his network. And because of the connections to her past and the way her business had started, Claire's salons were suddenly at risk of being scrutinized by the authorities as well. The stakes had never been higher. Every decision mattered. Every move could save or ruin the empire she had worked so hard to create. And yet, for the first time in months, she wasn't facing the battle alone. Ethan was there, steadfast and unwavering, her partner in love and in life, ready to defend her, support her, and fight alongside her through every storm. Even amid the fear, uncertainty, and public judgment, Claire felt a strange sense of calm. They were together again, and together, perhaps, they could survive anything. Things didn't go as Claire, or anyone, had hoped. She still clung to the image of a luxurious life, constantly chasing appearances. Donations, charity events, high-end purchases, it was all part of the act to whiten her reputation, to show the world that she was successful, generous, untouchable. But Ethan saw it clearly. He felt the hypocrisy, the relentless pursuit of appearances over reality. He had given her everything, years of hard work, his money, his time, his sacrifices. And now, after supporting the salons, the renovations, and every whim she claimed was necessary, he had nothing left. He worked tirelessly for a life that was slowly crumbling because Claire refused to see the limits of reality. The business, once thriving, began to collapse. Claire and Sophia started closing salons, one by one. Franchise owners filed claims against them, demanding compensation for lost profits, citing the damage to the brand caused by public scandals. Slowly, painfully, they were running out of money. One evening, desperate, Ethan tried to reason with her. "Claire, you need to sell some of your bags. You have over 30 of them, luxury bags that could save us now." Her face hardened. "Sell your car instead," she snapped. Ethan's voice rose, taut with frustration. "If I sell my car, I won't be able to get to work to earn money for rent, for food. We need to survive first." "Then find another way," Claire yelled back, her anger sharp. "I collected these bags for 10 years. I love them. I need them. Be a man." That was the last straw. Ethan felt the weight of every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dollar he had poured into keeping their lives together, wasted on someone who refused to see the reality. Silently, he walked out. The next day, he gathered his things, calm but resolute. With a lawyer, he finalized the divorce papers. He didn't yell, didn't beg, didn't argue. He simply did what he had to do to protect himself and reclaim his life. Claire was furious. Betrayed, abandoned, and humiliated, she turned to social media, crafting a post that portrayed herself as the victim. "My man left me just when I faced problems because of my ex-husband," she wrote, carefully framing herself as innocent and blameless, her own part in the collapse invisible to the world. Ethan, meanwhile, walked away quietly, leaving behind the chaos, the false luxury, and the illusions, carrying only the lessons of love, sacrifice, and the painful realization that sometimes, no matter how much you give, it will never be enough for someone blinded by appearances. Claire had gone too far. In her frustration and anger over Ethan leaving, she reached out to Richard. She told him everything. How Ethan had left her and Emily, how the house and their lives had collapsed, every scandal, every argument, every perceived betrayal. She framed herself as innocent, apologizing that her daughter Emily had witnessed it all. Richard, even behind bars, was furious. His influence extended far beyond the prison walls, through friends, allies, and networks that still moved power in the shadows. By the next day, Ethan's life turned into a nightmare. He was fired from his job under mysterious circumstances. Strangers cornered him on the street, and the confrontation left him badly injured, eventually hospitalized. Meanwhile, Claire felt a grim satisfaction. Ethan had gotten what she thought he deserved, she told herself. A cold sense of vindication that masked the chaos she had sown. But now, it was Richard's time. Claire, ever the strategist, went to the judge. She revealed facts about Richard that no one had known. Evidence, details, and stories that painted him as guilty and manipulative. In exchange for this information, she secured that her own activities would not be under investigation. She recorded a video explaining everything to the public. Her tone was calm, measured, full of charm and innocence. She claimed she knew nothing of Richard's misdeeds and that she and Emily were simply trying to survive after the divorce. People believed her. Her natural charm, the very innocence that had captivated Ethan in the first place, shone through. With public opinion swaying in her favor, her business slowly stabilized. There was still much work to do. Franchises needed repairs, reputation needed rebuilding, and public trust had to be regained. But for the first time in months, things looked promising. Ethan, meanwhile, lay in his hospital bed, battered not only physically but emotionally. He struggled to comprehend the layers of betrayal, manipulation, and deceit. Slowly, painfully, a harsh truth crystallized in his mind. If someone begins a relationship with lies, hiding essential truths and manipulating circumstances, it inevitably means they will continue to lie, deceive, and manipulate as the relationship progresses. It was a lesson Ethan had learned at a tremendous cost. His heart had been full of love, his efforts unwavering, and yet he had been blindsided. The world he had built with Claire had collapsed, not because of external forces, but because of the lies, the hidden agendas, and the manipulations of someone he had trusted completely. And now, as he slowly began to recover, he realized that moving forward meant something far more important than luxury, business, or appearances. It meant valuing truth, boundaries, and integrity above all else.